Hi, I'm meteorologist Dave Baker. How's it going, Acadiana? It is Monday, June the 3rd, and welcome to Let's Talk Tropics. We're going to be talking about a few different things today, not just the tropical weather, but also talking about what the models are starting to talk about as well. It looks like a few models are trying to at least try to wake up the Atlantic basin, including parts of the Western Caribbean and also into the southern part of the Gulf of Mexico. But one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about today was the different kinds of evacuation routes that we do have. And I know a lot of us like the interstate system, or some of us hate the interstate system. Many of us love to hate the interstate system. But it is there, and it is the primary evacuation routes. Generally I-10 and I-49, and as you can see here today, everything is moving along very nicely. But I did want to point out that bottom right-hand corner there, that Henderson exit. Man, did that take on some water over the course of the weekend there between Cecilia and Henderson. Had some reports of over 12 inches of rain that came down over the weekend. So hopefully we're going to be seeing improving conditions as we go through the next several days. But I wanted to go through the evacuation routes, and a lot of people just kind of pick Highway 90 and I-49 to get out of the way. So we're going to look at a number of different routes. We're going to start on the western half of Acadiana. The purple line at the bottom is LA-14. The purple line in the middle is I-10, and the top purple line is US Highway 190. So we're really trying to get people out of the coastal sections and north of that 190 corridor at the very least. So if you live there into Vermilion and Cameron parishes, Cameron, you don't have a lot of options. You're generally going to take either one of the LA-27s, whether it's west of Big Lake or east of Big Lake. You're going to have to take that northward through Lake Charles and then continue either on 27 or US Highway 171. 165 is also a good route that goes north-south, but you got to get there from the 14. So if you use LA 101 or 99 or 26, anywhere there across parts of southern Jeff Davis Parish, you can get your way to either I-10, 165, or Highway 190. And then if you live in Acadia Parish, the LA 97, 91, and 13 and 35 corridors are all great alternate routes if you're coming in from the south. If you come in from 14, you got 35 and 13 both if you're coming out of Kaplan. And then you're about halfway between Lake Arthur and Kaplan there around Gaydon, you can grab 91. Now you got a little bit of kind of work your way around unless you're going to take the old bridge there, the old pontoon bridge. But at least you can get to Highway 90 and back and forth between Crowley and Jennings and then northward from there. Let's go ahead and take a look at the eastern sections. And if you live in Vermilion Parish, you still have a number of options. You've got 35 that goes north out of Kaplan, as well as 13. 343 that goes northward there west of Abbeville. 167 is a main route that's going to take you right into Lafayette, as well as 339 coming out of Erath. That eventually becomes Vero School Road. Again, that might be a bigger traffic area if you're trying to get out from southern Vermilion Parish. You might want to try to work on those 343s or 35 out to the west to kind of avoid Lafayette. And the same goes for our friends down in Delcombe. You can use LA 89 and come northward. That becomes the Youngsville Highway, which eventually connects to Highway 90. Now, 90 is the main route coming from the southeast, and that would generally evacuate areas of New Iberia and Jeanerette. But I do want you to keep in mind that a lot of folks are going to be evacuating perhaps farther south from there. Morgan City, Houma, Thibodaux, and even the New Orleans area, they tend to use Highway 90. Those of us who live here in Acadiana have a better handle on some of the local roads. So if you live in Jeanerette or New Iberia, or even down toward Franklin, I would recommend Highway 182 or LA 87, which runs on the opposite side of the bayou. And then you can connect with 31 or 347 that also runs on either side of Bayou Teche. 31 will take you into Breaux Bridge, 347 will take you up into Henderson. So there's a lot of other roads that you can take. And for us who live here in Acadiana, it's best for us to try to use some of the other roads to get out rather than the main evacuation routes, and allow the folks that live closer to the coast or down toward Morgan City and into New Orleans to utilize roads, the main road, so they don't have to worry about some of the other roads that they might be unfamiliar with. But best idea is to go ahead and look at the maps and pick two different evacuation routes, especially if you live along or south of that LA 14 corridor. So let's go ahead and get into the forecast. First of all, we'll look at the month of June. And again, the areas that we watch are the western Gulf of Mexico and the western part of the Caribbean. And some of the models are starting to wake up the western part of the Caribbean in just a little bit. We'll get to that in a couple of minutes and why we think either this will or won't develop based on consistency. So as we look at the Gulf of Mexico, everything pretty much beautiful out there. We still have a little bit of agricultural smoke that's down there over the parts of the Bay of Campeche, but for the most part, the Gulf of Mexico is looking mostly clear. Some of this smoke will continue to lift northward toward Texas, but I don't think we're going to see a whole lot reaching the Acadiana region, but we've got a good onshore flow in place. Now, down in the western part of the Caribbean, along the coast of Central America, at least last week when we left you, there was a bit of a low pressure area that was here over the western part of the Caribbean. It does appear that it's kind of moved a little bit farther toward the west. Some models actually have something developing as it drifts off into the Caribbean or into the eastern part of the Pacific Ocean, but there are a couple of other models that drift it there, and then a piece of it maybe breaking off and heading back over into the western part of the Caribbean Sea, and I'll show you that in some of those models coming up in just a little bit. But the rest of the Caribbean really not looking too bad. Looks like we've still got a bit of a tropical wave that's kind of working its way westward here, that's generating some showers and thunderstorms there south of Cuba and over toward Jamaica this afternoon. And the remainder of the tropical Atlantic satellite, again, is showing a number of tropical waves that are moving across the Atlantic Ocean. You got one there, you got one there. The other one looks like it's probably about right in here, and then the other one back here. But this is normal for this time of the year to see these tropical waves kind of working their way west. Maybe a little bit of Saharan dust out there, but it just doesn't seem to be quite as prevalent as what we've seen in previous years. Now, one thing that will inhibit some of the tropical development is wind shear, and we talked about that last week, how developing tropical systems need light winds in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere, so you can get a vertically stacked type of center, and that becomes a more efficient engine and therefore is a strengthening type of system. But when you have all this wind shear that's out here in the middle part of the Caribbean and also back into the Gulf of Mexico, and there's also a lot of wind shear out here in the development zone farther to the east, you're not going to see a lot of development there. Now, with that trough that's down here to the south along the Central American coast, we might be seeing some weakening of this wind shear here, and again, that is why some of the models are trying to at least start to wake up parts of the Atlantic Basin. Let's also quickly look at the tropical cyclone heat potential. Again, if you're unfamiliar with this map, we tend to look at water temperatures at 80 degrees or higher at the surface, but when you look at tropical cyclone heat potential, it's actually looking at some of the water temperatures that are a little bit farther down under the surface. So again, if my telestrator would work here, that is the area that we're seeing very high heat potential, and it's kind of hard to see, but Gulf Coast is up here, this is Cuba right here, Haiti, Dominican Republic, and you got Jamaica here, and then Central American's coast is right there. So this is the Western Caribbean and the extreme southern part of the Gulf of Mexico. If anything were to develop in that area and had decent atmospheric conditions, we would be pretty concerned with that particular area because of the TCHP, the high heat potential, which basically is extra, jet fuel for these hurricanes to work with. But at the very least, the National Hurricane Center does not think we're going to see any tropical development over the next several days. But that's going out 7 days. Let's look at some of the models. Some folks have been on Facebook already saying, ooh, the tropics are starting to wake up. Well, let's just go ahead and look at the long-range GFS model. This is going to take us out about 2.5 weeks. And one of the things that you might start to notice in this particular model is a bit of a low pressure area trying to develop right in here in the Yucatan Channel. That is not a good place for anything to develop, but we also have maybe a little bit of a low pressure area trying to develop here in the far southwestern part of the Bay of Campeche, but that wouldn't be until about the end of the second week in June. So let's take a look at consistency. I like to look at the different models and then go back to the previous model and the one before that and the one before that to see about consistency. And the latest model that we have here, now this is the time frame here is Monday, Tuesday of next week. So just outside of that 7-day window for the Euro model, even though the Euro model is kind of starting to show some trends downward on pressures, it just doesn't go out very far. So we have to depend on the GFS. And on the GFS, pretty clearly there going into the early part of Tuesday morning, they've got a bit of a closed low pressure area here. With the pressures trying to drop, could indicate possibly a tropical depression. So let's go back to the previous model before that, and this one ran this morning, and again, you got a bit of a low pressure area there, kind of in the same place, and that was looking at Tuesday morning, early Tuesday afternoon. Let's go back again. This is the one that ran very, very early this morning, or late last night actually, and again, that's 3 models in a row where we've got a bit of a low pressure area. We go out to the 18Z yesterday. So this ran yesterday evening, and there's that low once again, and we'll go back out one more. That's the previous one. There are hints of some pressure drops in this area, but really no closed center of circulation. But pressures do seem to be a little bit lower than normal than what they would normally be. So there's a bit of a trend that there's going to be some pressures dropping, and again, this is something we'll continue to watch over the next several days to see if that consistency stays there. I will tell you that the models that develop any kind of tropical depression or weak tropical storm in that area, most of them are trying to pull. I'm going to go ahead and pull the one that we've got for today, but most of them are going to drag this a little bit off toward the northeast and perhaps could get up toward the Florida coastline and then eventually out into the Atlantic Ocean. So far, I haven't seen any model trends that show this particular area in the Yucatan Peninsula or Yucatan Channel moving into the western part of the Gulf. So right now, the general threat is going to be Central America, Western Cuba, and into portions of Florida. Again, if this actually develops, we are still a little bit more than a week out on that. So that's something that we'll watch, but we're not super concerned with yet. And at the very least, the National Hurricane Center isn't really talking a whole lot, at least for the next seven days. So again, this is the best time to do your preparation, the long-term type of preparation, stuff that you can have around. You can have that non-perishable food, water, things like that, picking up around the yard, making sure the trees branches are clipped if they haven't already come down with the recent severe weather. So those are some things that you can do now when there's no tropical weather to talk about. But anything that looks interesting in the models, especially in that particular area, if we get decent atmospheric conditions and you got that high tropical cyclone heat potential, that could be something that we would be looking at sometime next week. So really that's the only game in town, so we don't have a whole lot to worry about right now, but it is something that we'll watch on the models. And the Euro model will start to get into that window too, so at least we'll have 2 models to look at as we go into Tuesday. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. If you do, please like this video and subscribe to the channel and make sure you turn on those notifications too. I'll be back tomorrow at noon with another edition of Let's Talk Tropics, and of course we'll go a little farther out into that model data. And if you'd like to join me earlier in the day, Acadiana Weather Today, a little morning chat on the upcoming local weather conditions and how they're going to affect our day. That usually drops sometime between 7:30 and 8 o'clock each weekday morning. For now, I'm meteorologist Dave Baker. I hope you have a great Monday, and I will see you on Tuesday morning.